So how many of you yesterday spent your time watching the royal wedding? All right, one man. All right, fantastic. Appreciate that. Like, hey, I'm with you, buddy. I watched it too. I'm a history buff. I like that sort of thing. And so I was listening through. I didn't get up at 4 a.m. because you people who do that are crazy. Like, there's DVRs, people. Like, come on, let's make this happen. But I was rewatching some of the coverage, and I love some of the pomp and the circumstance and like the history behind stuff. I think it's really, really fascinating. And so they were showing pictures of the queen, and she gets out in this lime green outfit, and it's like the queen always wears bright colors because she wants attention on her when she walks into the room. She always wants to be found. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And so they started to tell these little trivia things about a monarchy and about royalty and about rule. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting yesterday, they were talking about the wedding banquet. And at the wedding banquet, they put the meal out in front of everybody. But there's a time frame that even if you're not done eating, if the queen finishes, you're done. Whenever she's done, you're done because she's the queen, right? And so when she's finished eating, even if you're not, like they're coming and they're snatching it away because all of it revolves around her because she's the royal. She is the possessor of the royal crown. And because she's the possessor of it, all of the things that happen that day, even though it's not her day, even though it's Meghan Markle's day and Harry, whatever his last name is, day, right? Like Windsor, is that it? Sussex? I don't know, whatever it is. But anyway, it's not her day, but it's her day because she's the possessor of the crown, right? And so I was thinking about this. As we look at this story today, we're going to see this interaction that Abram has with royalty. And he has this choice that he has to make in his mind. Is he going to think like a royal, or is he going to think like a believer? Is he going to think like a royal, or is he going to think like a believer? And so let's look at what it has to say. I love this passage in chapter 14, just to catch you up through verse 10. There were these people that had this sort of allyship. There were 5 different kings, and they were being oppressed by these other 4 more powerful kings. Now, these 5 kings are right around the region of Abram. And so you've got the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, and then 3 other ones, right? And so they decide they're going to throw off the shackles from this 4 kings who reign over them. And so they're not going to have it anymore. And so they decide 5 against 4 is pretty good odds. And so we're going to go out and fight these guys. And we're going to throw off these shackles. We're going to be completely independent. We're not going to have to pay tribute to these 4 kings anymore. And so I want you to see what happens. Look at what happens. Verse 10. Now the Valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits. That's like tar, right? It's like asphalt, tar pits. And as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, and the rest fled into the hill country. So the enemy took possession. How much? All of the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah. And what else? What does it say? All of their provisions, and went on their way. All right, so this is 2 whole cities worth of stuff. That's a big deal. Right? So I want you to imagine, like, even if you say, okay, a small subsection, even if it's like your neighborhood, right? Somebody comes in and takes literally everything that's in your neighborhood that's valuable. It wasn't just one city. It was multiple cities. There were 5 cities, and we know at least that these 4 kings ended up, their armies rounded up everything that was in all of Sodom and all of Gomorrah. It doesn't say what happened to the other 3 towns, but we can assume maybe they took some of their stuff too. Now that is some loot right there, isn't it? That's a big haul for a day. So these guys, they figure 5 versus 4 is pretty good odds, but they get stomped. They get stomped. They're not really ready for the battle. And so these 4 kings who are more powerful, their armies overtake them. They take all of the stuff and all of the provisions and some of the people from Sodom and Gomorrah, an entire town's worth, 2 towns worth at least. Now look at what it says. They also took who? Lot, the son of Abram's brother. This is his nephew, who was what? What does it say? He was dwelling in Sodom and his possessions, and they went on their way. Do you remember Abram? I talked about this in our C group video. If you missed that, you can look on our Facebook page. But he didn't call dibs, right? He let Lot have first pick. And so he gives Lot first pick of any of the land. Lot picks the most lush area there is, and it's right near Sodom and Gomorrah. And so Lot pitches his tent outside the city. Well, now some time's gone by, and like the city has drawn him in. Like the evil, the influences, he's like part of them now. He's no longer a sojourner. He's like part of the town. And so in the middle of this battle, we don't know if he was fighting on their side or if he's just kind of caught up in the fury. But these four kings end up taking everything from Sodom and everything from Gomorrah and probably these three other towns. And they take away Lot and his family and everything they own. Now look at what happens. This is crazy. This is a huge, huge thing. Look what it says. Verse 13. Then one who escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner. If you don't know how to say these names, don't worry, I don't either. It's all good. All right, you can just say it however you want. It's fine. These were the allies of Abram. And when Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house. These are servants that are fighting age, like 18 and up, right? And look at how many were in Abram's house. How many is it? 318. That's a big house, people. That's a lot of people. That's a town, right? And in the middle of this deal, look what it says. They went in pursuit as far as Dan. So Abram says, all right, there are these four kings, and they beat 5 towns worth of people. 5 went against 4. They lost. But here's the thing. I'm old and surly. You know what I'm saying? He's 85 years old around this time. And so he's like, I've got some experience. I've got some wisdom on these boys. I've got 3 other allies that are right here. I'm going to take them with me. It's going to be 4 versus 4, but I'm not going to be stupid. I'm going to fight them at night. I'm going to sneak in. And so he follows them, pursues them as far as Dan. Now look at what it says, verse 15. So he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. And then he brought back, what does it say? All of the what? Possessions. This is the interactive portion. And he also brought back who? His kinsman Lot, along with his possessions and the women and the people. Like, somebody strike up the band, people. Like, Hail the Conquering Hero. Like, this is a huge deal. Like, 5 kings go against 4 and they get their tails whipped. And everything from their cities are gone. Complete devastation. Everything in their homes. Everything that's valuable. Every bit of money in their bank account. Like, all of it is gone. All of the people that they counted as valuable, they took. Now you're a slave. And Abram comes in and saves the day. Not just for his family, not just for Lot, but he saves the day for Sodom, totally evil people. For Gomorrah, totally pagan people. For these 3 other towns where the people who are set up, he's a true hero. He's not just in for a few people, he's in to save them all. And so he brings back all the people. Like, he didn't just say, this would have been his prime opportunity. Hey, God, what did you say was going to happen? You're going to give me what now? This land, right? This promise that, well, guess what? All these people are gone. Like, I'll just take it now. I'll go rescue Lot and his family. I'll bring them back. I'll bring back all the stuff, and I'll let them stay up there as slaves. And so I'll just take the land that you said you're going to give me one day. Is that what he does? No. Like, this was his moment. He could have taken it. He could have said, hey, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. I better make this thing happen. They're all out there. They're decimated. I just defeated the people who defeated them. Like, they can all be my servants. And now, guess what? Cha-ching, it's my town. But he doesn't do it. Do you see what he does? He brings them all back. Now, look at what happens. Look at what happens as he comes back victorious. This is so cool. Look at this. All of this stuff is his. It's the spoils of war. All the people, all the servants, all the stuff, all the possessions, literally at least 2 full towns worth of riches. They're his if he wants them. He can claim them as the spoils of war. But look at what he chooses to do instead. This is crazy. Look at this. Verse 17. After his return from the defeat of, now this is not how you say this name. I'm saying it wrong on purpose because I think it's fun, but it's Chedorlaomer. All right, see, because I like cheese. So after the defeat of Chedorlaomer, right now, and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the Valley of Siddim, that is the King's Valley. So he's been decimated. His army's been defeated. Somehow he makes it out alive. But did he mount a rescue attempt? Nope. He waits for Abram to come back, and he hears that he's been rescued. Do you think he's grateful? Do you think he's thankful? Do you think he's going to have this magnanimous personality where, oh my goodness, look at you, hail the conquering hero. Look, everybody, can we get a round of applause? He's a 13-time heavyweight champion of the world. Abram, right? Like, is he going to have this moment where he honors him? No. Look at what happens. There's another guy who shows up who doesn't even have a dog in the fight. There's this other king, this other royalty that shows up. Look what it says. Verse 18, and Melchizedek, the king of where? Salem. This is Jerusalem. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was what? What does it say he was? He was a priest of the Most High God. Now, we don't know exactly how he knew about the one true God, but he did. This guy, he's not just a worshiper of the one true God. He's a priest of the one true God. And he's the king over a town called Peace, Shalom, Salem. It's where we get Jerusalem today. So he's there as this king of peace, serving the God of peace, the Most High God. And he's this priest, and he hears about what Abram has done. And he decides, even though he didn't have a dog in the fight, he goes down and he's going to offer gifts to all of Abram's men. He brings out bread and he brings out wine. He's like, you guys just fought this unbelievable battle. You've made every other town safe from the tyranny of these 4 ruling kings. And I want you to see what Abram does. Listen to this. Melchizedek says this, and he blessed him and said, read this verse out loud with me. What does it say? Blessed be Abraham by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. I love this moment. Like, he comes back and Abram has put the smack down on these 4 kings who just defeated 5 other kings. I mean, he's put the smack down. He's put the whooping on these people. And he's brought back all the townspeople and all the town stuff. And all of it is his if he wants to claim his royal authority, right? Like, hey, you guys call yourselves king. Like, I got more fighting men than you guys do. I'm just going to call myself king over all of you people now. Does that sound good? He could claim it. His royal authority in this moment. God, you said you were going to give me all this land. I guess this is how you're going to do it. I'm just going to take it. Or maybe I'll just pay for it with all my spoils of war. But instead, he doesn't do that. Melchizedek comes up to him. He's this priest of God. And here's what he says. Great victory, Abraham. And guess what? You had nothing to do with it. Guess who gave you the victory? It was the God who's over everything. Guess who deserves the praise? It's God, because he's over it all. He's the Most High God. He's blessed you by taking these enemies and putting them in your hand. Isn't that amazing? Isn't God so good, Abram? And Abram looks at him and he's like, you know what? You're exactly right. Like, this isn't about me. This is about God. This isn't my victory. This is God's victory. This isn't my stuff. This is God's stuff. I could look at everything that's right here and I could say, I am the possessor and I am the blesser and I am the giver of all of these things, so serve me, right? He could have said that, but he doesn't. Do you know what he does? Instead, he looks in faith and belief and he says, all this stuff, God is the possessor. And all of this stuff, God is the blesser. And all of this stuff, God is the giver. And look at what he does. What does it say he does? And Abram gave him a what? A tenth of everything. He gives this tithe to this king he'd never met before. This king of Salem, this king of peace, who's a priest before God. And he's like, you know what? Like, all this stuff, I could say it's mine. I could say I'm the blesser, I'm the giver. Look at all these people that I set free. But instead, you know what? I need to realize God is the only possessor. He's the only blesser. He's the only giver. So I need to not give, but I need to give back to him out of everything that's been given to me. So he gives this tenth of everything to this king in worship of the God, one true God. Write this thing down today. Here's what I want you to remember. Listen, faith is believing and walking out this trust that God is the only possessor And he's the only blesser, and he's the only giver. Now I don't know about you, but like when I was growing up, I had this view. My parents, they would write out their tithe check every Sunday. Anybody like have the envelopes when you were growing up at home? I had like my little box of envelopes, and I would take my allowance, and I would get the money, and I would put in like, the 10th of that or whatever. And I would see my mom and my dad write out their check. They wanted to make sure their kids knew, like, we want to give back to God what he's given to us, right? And so every week they'd take in their little envelope, and they'd put it in the offering basket. And I knew, like, my parents' view was God owns it all, right? It was this physical symbol of them saying God owns everything. But there was this misunderstanding in my mind. Here's what I thought. You ready? Maybe some of you have thought this. Maybe some of you still think it. Here's what I thought. You give God 10%, and then 90% is yours. That's what I thought. I kind of thought like you pay God off. Like, that sounds so crazy now. But I thought, okay, like you work hard, you recognize God gave you the ability, then you get all the stuff, and then all this stuff, like 10% is God's and 90% is yours. And so you go through life sort of paying God, saying, yep, thanks for that, and then you live with the 90%, you do whatever you want with it. And that's not the idea that God has of generosity or stewardship at all. Like, God doesn't need your money. He doesn't need your money, right? Like, he can do all kinds of stuff without you. He owns it all, right? But giving is about recognizing that it's an opportunity to bless the one who's blessed you. It's an opportunity to say, I'm not the giver, you're the giver. I'm not the possessor, you're the possessor of it all. And so now in my life, like when I look at it, it's so much different than that. Like Katie sits down every week whenever she gets paid or I get paid, and she goes online on our website, cccmorrisville.com, and she clicks the give button, she gives there, right? But then it's so much more than that. It's like, okay, but what about the kids that are in Ethiopia, right? With the Post family? What about the Carneys that are in Belize, who are ministering to people and like making sure kids have school lunches and health care and dinner? Like, what about them, right? Like, what about like Compassion International? What about these kids around the world who need to know about Jesus and get fed and all these other things? And so we've prayed about it as a family and say, okay, this is what we feel like God's calling us to, and that's what goes out first. But then the rest, whatever's left, whatever percentage it is, I don't really know. Like, whatever it is, it's like, well, that's not ours, it's God's. Because, see, even after you've given, you're still not the possessor. He's the possessor. Even after you've chosen to bless, you realize you're not the blesser. It's not, did you hear what I did the other day? Right? Did you see the person I helped? Like, does Jesus talk? He says, no, don't even let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Like, do it in secret so that your Father sees and he rewards, right? And you're not the blesser. God's the blesser. You're not the giver. Did you like originate any of that stuff? No. He originated it and he gave it to you. You're just giving back. You're living with this open hand. And this is what Abram gets. In this moment, he says, I could be like all the other royalty. And I could say, I'm the possessor and I'm the blesser and I'm the giver. But instead, I need to recognize God's the possessor. He's the blesser. He's the giver. And so he gives back 10% of everything that had come from these two towns to this priest. Now look at what happens. This is crazy. Verse 21. Now the king of Sodom said to Abram, I love this. Is he going to say, hey, thanks so much for rescuing my people? You the man, Abram. Hey, listen, I just need to recognize you must have this awesome God out there who looked over you. Is that what he says? Look at what the king of Sodom says. Hey, give me the people and just take the goods for yourself. He's in no room to negotiate. How prideful is this royal? Like, he looks at it and he's like, just give me the people back. He's like, you can't claim the people. They're not yours anymore. You just give me the people. You keep the stuff. It's not your stuff. Like, he just thinks he's in charge of it all. Do we ever feel like that? Oh, this is mine. This is my stuff. You just do this and then I'll do this, right? Like, this is what he does. Look at what he says. This is crazy. But Abram said, I love this. Like, this is, if Abram had a mic, he'd drop it at the end of this phrase. Look at this. Here's what he says. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I lifted my hand to the Lord God Most High. What does he say? Possessor of heaven and earth. I wouldn't take a thread or a sandal or a strap or anything that's yours, because I don't want you to ever be able to say, I'm the one who made Abram rich. Mic drop. I'll take nothing except for what the young men have eaten while they freed your people. And the share of the men who went with me. My 3 buddies, they can take their share if they want, but I'm not taking anything from you because I'm not letting anybody say anyone other than God is my possessor and blesser and giver. What an amazing thing. Now look at what happens. I love this. Right after this, he says it's not human wealth that's going to buy it. I'm not going to get this land by buying. I'm not going to get this land by conquering. I'm going to wait on the Lord to fulfill his promise. And I'm going to realize he's the possessor, and when he wants to give it to me, he will. He's the blesser, and when he wants to bless me, he will. He's the giver. When he wants to give to me, he will, and I'm going to give back to him. Now look at what happens. We divide this story, but it's really the same one. Look at what happens in the next chapter, verse 1. We'll read through this quickly. After these things, it's still connected, right? After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, because I am your what? Shield. And your reward will be very great. Listen, can I just tell you something right now? God is a much better rewarder of you than you are. Because he owns so much more than you own. He can give so much more than you can give. When you say, oh, I need to treat myself, right? Like your resources are limited. When God says, I want to treat that lady, he owns it all, right? Now look at what he says. Verse 2, Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? Because I continue childless. The heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. That's one of his servants. And Abram said, behold, you've given me no offspring, a member of my house who will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came and said, this man won't be your heir. Your very own what? Son is going to be your heir. He's been waiting 10 years on the promise of God and nothing. Have you been waiting for God to fulfill something he's spoken to you? 10 years he's been waiting. 10 years he's been worshiping. 10 years he's been watching. And he says, God, I have the chance to have stuff, and I really don't care about stuff. I mean, I'm great that you bless with stuff, but Rod, what more than anything, I want a son. I don't want my servant to take over everything that's been made. And God says, I'm going to give you a son. Now look at what it says. So God brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars if you're able to number them. Abram takes off his sandals and he's counting. He's like, 20. Okay, I'm done. Right? Like this is. And he looks up and he says, if you're able to number them, so shall your offspring be. Now who's he saying this to? An 85-year-old man. How old is Sarai? 75 years old. 85 years old. He's been intimate with his spouse. Since they got married, no pregnancy. No son. They wanted a son. And the Lord had not chosen at that moment to give them one. He's 85 years old. He just saw him win this battle for him. He just saw God win this victory. He had the opportunity to say, I'm the possessor, I'm the blesser, I'm the giver. And he says, no, that's so stupid for me to say that. God, you're the only possessor. You're the only blesser. You're the only giver. And he says, but God, more than stuff, I really want this child. And God looks at him and says, don't worry. It's still going to happen. And look at what it says. As an 85-year-old man with a 75-year-old wife, look at what Abram does. What does he say? And he believed the Lord, and God counted it to him as righteousness. He believed the impossible. He believed, okay, God, I just saw you do something else that seemed impossible. I'm just going to choose in faith to believe this is possible too. And he trusts the Lord. Faith isn't just like an up here belief. It's walking it out in a way that you see it. Look at what he says. The next verse, verse 7. He said, I'm the Lord who brought you out of Ur to the Chaldeans, to give you this land to possess. But he said, oh Lord, how am I supposed to know that I'll possess it? Now, here's the thing. Like, this blows me away. This just shows how Abram was a regular dude. He believes what God says. Don't miss this. He believes what God says, that you're going to have a kid when you're 85. And he doesn't question it. Okay, God, I totally trust you. And then he says, by the way, I'm going to give you this land. The land that he already conquered just a minute ago. And he said, well, how can I know, God? Do you ever do that with the Lord? Do you trust him with impossible things like your salvation? Do you trust him with huge things like, wait a minute, Jesus died for me? He loves me? You want to give me a home in heaven forever? Like, you trust him with that stuff, but then you're like, I just don't know. My kid's a driver now, right? In this moment, he had just conquered the whole land. Like, do you trust God with your eternity, but you don't trust him with your marriage? Like, seriously, he had just been told, hey, I'm the blesser, I'm the giver, I'm the possessor. And he's like, God, I totally believe you can do the impossible. And he's like, I'm going to give you this land too. And he just had the land in his hands. He's like, yeah, but how do I know? Do you ever do that? Look at what God tells him. I love this. We'll finish with this. Look at what he says. And so he said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old. This is God talking. A young female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all of these, and he cut them in half, and he laid them each half against the other. And he didn't cut the birds in half. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. So as the sun was going down, a deep, deep sleep fell on Abram. And behold, a dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. And the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that's not theirs. They're going to be servants there. They'll be afflicted for 400 years. But then I'm going to bring judgment on that nation they serve. And afterward, they'll come out with great possessions. As for you, you're going to go to your fathers in peace. You'll be buried at a good old age. And they'll come back here in the fourth generation because the iniquity of the Amorites isn't complete yet. And when the sun had gone down, it was dark. And behold, a smoking fire pot and flaming torch passed between the pieces. And on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring, I will give this land. Let me tell you what's happening, because like culturally, are any of you Hebrews in here in the Old Testament? Anybody? Okay, nobody. All right, good. Okay, so here's what was happening. People would make a covenant, like a business deal, an agreement, right? A contract. Everybody don't flee on me. Like I promise, I'm almost done. So here's what they would do. They would take and they would come up with the terms of agreement, right? Like you got your term sheet, and then they would sign a contract. But instead of signing their name, here's what they would do. They would agree to the terms, and then they would take these animals and they would split them in half. And then they would offer them like this. They would create a walkway, right? And so then if you were going to agree to this contract, what you would do is you would shake hands, or actually you'd grab thighs. That's a little weird. But anyway, so can you imagine if we did that at church? Thanks. They're going to come up for church membership right now. Everybody, as they come by, would you just grab each other's thighs? That would be fantastic. Right? That'd be a little weird. So anyway, they would grab each other's thigh, and then here's what they would do. They would walk through the dead pieces of animals, halves, right, on each side. And here's what they would say. They would walk through, one person would walk through, then the next person would walk through it, and then here's what they would say. If I break our agreement, may I be just like one of these animals. They took it that seriously. When they made an agreement, it was a life and death covenant. That's what it means. This covenant, life and death. And so they would split the animals. Both parties would walk through. Both would agree to the terms. Both would say, hey, if this doesn't happen just like I said it would, may I be just like one of these dead animals. Wouldn't that be nice for like things today? You know, you could like totally trust people in that moment, couldn't you? Like you wouldn't feel bad about buying a car. You'd be like, hey, if it's anything that's wrong, I'm just saying, you got a dead horse's head right there. That's all I know. Right? Now here's what's amazing about this deal. What happens with Abram? What happens with him? He falls asleep. What happens with God? God walks through the covenant. Here's what he says. This is so cool. Don't miss this. Here's what he says. Abram, even if you blow it, I'm still keeping the covenant. Even if you mess it up, I'm still keeping the covenant. Here's the deal. You got no terms in the covenant at all. They're all one-sided. I'm going to be faithful to keep my promise to you. And so I'm going to walk through and I'm going to say, if I don't keep my word, then I should be like one of these dead animals. The God of the universe is so personal. He makes a covenant with one guy. And he says, you don't have to do anything on your side of the covenant. All you've got to do is believe. I'm going to walk through, and this is my promise to you despite your performance for me. Isn't that amazing? Now, what other covenant does that sound like? Jesus, right? That's his covenant with us. It's not based on your performance. He says, I love you, and I died for you on the cross. I took all of your hell and all your punishment and all of your shame, And it's not that you have to jump through hoops to please me. Listen, you couldn't please me. You can never be perfect. I'm not even asking you to enter into the terms. I'm just saying I've already done it for you. And if you just trust that, if you believe that, then all the benefits of the covenant go to you too. This is what God says to Abram. He says, you want to know something? Look right here. I'm the possessor. I'm the giver. I'm the blesser. And because you believe that, you won't even be able to imagine what I'm going to do for you. Do you know God says the same thing for us? Listen, for you, it might be an issue of giving, right? Maybe you look at it and you're like, this is mine. I'm the possessor. If I choose to bless, great. If I choose not to bless, it's mine, right? I'm the giver. If I choose to give, great. If not, great, whatever. Listen, that's not how it works in God's economy. He's the possessor. He owns it all. He's the blesser. The only reason you have anything is because he gave it to you. He's the giver. When you give, you're not the giver. You just give back, right? And you recognize it. And when you do, guess what? Do you know he's made a covenant with you? He says, for generous people in the faith, he says, my God will supply some of your needs according to his riches and glory. Is that what he says? No, he says, I'll supply all of your needs. The context of that was people who were giving generously. God makes that covenant with you. You know what? For some of you, it might not be giving. It might be a relationship. Maybe you look at this and you're like, hey, you know what? I'm the possessor, and I'm the blesser, and I'm the giver, and if it's going to be, it's up to me, right? And God looks at it and says, are you serious? I'm the possessor. I'm the blesser. I'm the giver. Why are you trying to take my job? Why are you trying to proclaim yourself royalty when I'm the only real king? He says, instead, let me be the possessor and the blesser and the giver. Stop trying to do this all on your own. Fix it. Maybe for you it's parenting. Maybe for you it's finances. But listen, let me just tell you today, there's only one possessor, and it's not you. There's only one blesser, and it's not you. There's only one giver, and it's not you. But we need to honor the one who is, right? And so today, whatever your issue is, where you're trying to make it happen or where you're trying to make it be, can I just tell you, look at what happened for Abram. When he recognized God's the giver and God's the blesser and God's the possessor, God enters into this time where he's like, you just lay back and watch what happens. I'm not even saying you have to walk through the thing. I'm doing it for you. And you can trust me. Listen, for some of you today, maybe you need to take a step of faith. Take a step into your relationship. Not, if I do this, and this, then our relationship will be fixed, right? Maybe you should still do those things, but realize God's the fixer, not you, right? Maybe for you, it's in your finances. Maybe for some of you, like you're givers, but, you need to be at a place of generosity. It's not that you pay off God. It's he owns it all. And so for some of you, maybe it's taking that step instead of just, $20 a month or whatever it is. Maybe you take that step and like Abram, you begin tithing. It's not because God needs your money. It's because you need to recognize he's the possessor and he's the blesser and he's the giver, right? Maybe for some of you, you're already at a place where you sort of give back to him on a regular basis. Maybe it's a place of generosity where you need to say, okay, God, it's not just that I give, but you own it all. You own everything. You own my house. You own my car. You own my clothes. You own my stuff. You own my time. You own my talents. And so, God, you're the possessor, and you're the blesser, and you're the giver. And so I just lay it all down before you because you own it all. What is it for you today that you need to take that next step of faith? Let's pray. This morning, I just want to encourage you that real faith, is not just believing that God's the possessor and blesser and giver. But real faith believes and then walks out in action that God is the blesser and the possessor and the giver. He's the possessor and blesser and giver of your relationships. He's the possessor and blesser and giver of the number of your days on this planet. He's the possessor and blesser and giver of your time and your talents and your stuff and your relationships. Listen, are you having a moment like Abram where there's a temptation going on? You have this chance where you can set yourself on the throne and you can claim royalty and you can say, look at what I've done. I want to tell you, the blessings of that kind of life are so limited. But when Abram surrendered, said, no, I've already decided in my heart, anything that happens, anything I get, it's God's. Anything that it's a blessing, I'm not the blesser, He's the blesser. Anything that I give, I'm just giving back. I had already set it in my heart. I wouldn't even take a sandal strap because I didn't want anybody to say they were the ones who made Abram rich other than the only possessor and blesser and giver. So what sort of step of faith do you make today? Do you need to trust Him with a relationship? Do you need to trust Him with a talent? Do you need to trust Him with a job? Do you need to trust Him with your finances? Don't just believe it, but let's start walking it out, because when you do that, that's when God shows up in such a huge way and says, I was just waiting for you to trust me. Let me show you what I can do. Lord, I pray that in every area of life that you call us to steward, our time, our talents, our treasure, our relationships, God, I pray that we would recognize you as the possessor of all things, you as the giver, and you as the blesser. And help us to give back honoring you and your role in every single way. In Jesus' name. All God's people said.